Hello guys, it's Silk here, and I'm finally bringing you all my initial plane guide for BF5. I say initials, things always change, and if so, I'll be sure to update you all. However, personally, I've been flying planes in games for a while now. In Armored 3, I racked up about 1,000 hours in the planes before moving to BF4, where I totaled around 500 hours with about 50,000 kills. I'm playing BF5 now since day one, and hope to share my combined experience with you all to improve your piloting skills. We'll start by looking at the loadout of all the fighters in BF5. I won't be covering bombers as I feel like they're going to get nerfed very soon and cannot be flown solo against a strong enemy fighter pilot at all. So if you're struggling with a bomber, I just advise you to pick up a fighter plane and shoot them down. It really isn't that hard, and I've never had any issue doing so, and anyone can do it, I feel like. We'll start by looking at my favourite plane in the game, the BF109 G6. I'll just preface this by saying this is the absolute best way to run the plane, as at the moment, the other upgrades really just aren't even close to as good as the ones on the side of the tree I'm about to show you. And yeah, this is the most versatile plane in the game, so I'd recommend using this one when you're on the Germans. So the first upgrade is Field Repair. This instantly repairs a broken wing or 10% of your damage. This can come in handy after a light crash or in dogfights, as I'll explain later. The second upgrade is really essential here, and it's definitely what makes this plane the most versatile plane in the game, and that's the explosive rounds. It takes 5 of these at an infantry's feet to kill them, allowing a pilot to rack up easy kills in a strafe. I've got up to 5 kills just with cannons alone in a strafe with these, without the targets even being separated. They're really good, and I'd recommend definitely using these on the BF99 G6. The next thing is the armored fuselage. It's not that important, but it's not that bad either. It reduces 15% of the damage taken from explosives such as flat cannons. This is kind of alright, you won't notice when this is helping you, but it will save you. Because you end up pulling out of AA strafes sometimes on, 5 health. It would have saved you there, 10 health, it would have saved you there. It's definitely something that you'll never notice, but it will always save you. So it's a decent thing to have, and you have to have it for the next upgrade, which is the double rocket pods. These are just an excellent tool to have on the plane. Firstly, they deal immense splash damage to infantry, allowing for you to just mop up kills you don't get with the cannons. They're also very effective at stationary AA cannons because those are basically infantry. You can fire them off and pull off from a long distance for a virtually free kill. The thing you should note about doing this is they have no vertical drop, only horizontal. So against a stationary AA cannon, you literally put your crosshair on them and click and they're dead from any range. It's really good. They do about 35 to 40 damage on tanks, and in my opinion this isn't a very good use of them unless you have a wingman that also has them. Otherwise the tank cannot repair you. But with 2 of them, like 2 BF109 G6s, you can both hit the tank and you'll be able to kill it. So that might be an alright use, but as a solo pilot, I'd only kill tanks if I see them on low health, so you can actually kill them. Against planes, they're really something else. I haven't seen many people use them like this, however, but 2 rockets on a head-on Spitfire is an easy insta-kill. So I'll try to bait Spitfires into a head-on with me, and I'll just shoot the rockets and pull off, and it will insta-kill them every time. It's such an easy thing to do, and it's really effective at just getting rid of that pesky Spitfire. They're also usable against bombers, which is what I see most people use them for. The only time I'd recommend using them on a bomber is when the pilot switches to the rear seat, so you can just shoot pods and avoid damage. However, if they're not rear seating, you might as well just use the explosive rounds because they kill fast enough anyway. I want to mention rolls as well. It's hard to do that for the BF109 G6, but I just say it's pretty much anti-everything. I would go away from anti-tank and just say it's more of an anti-infantry / anti-air vehicle. And talking about anti-air vehicles, we're going to be moving on to the BF109 G2 now. And I have this plane set up as a dogfighter, which is what it should be used for. Firstly, the twin 7.62 cannons are useful against enemy bombers. They have a low velocity, but the only way to kill bombers besides the rockets are these cannons. The main gun just won't do enough damage. Secondly, we have the air radar. This won't help with really general awareness, but it is useful in a dogfight. It can help you know when the enemy exits the dogfight, if they switch, and if someone else enters the dogfight, that kind of stuff. It's really useful for that. The automatic leading edge is a niche upgrade that increases roll speed, and while dillaning, this is kind of helpful, but again, it's pretty niche. Roll speed, you're not often limited by it in a dogfight in this game. Finally, we have the same rocket pods found on the G6, which I'll skip explaining, but again, very good weapon, and I'd be using these against infantry on this plane rather than anything else pretty much, because that's what you have to go for. The G2 is basically anti-infantry and dogfighting, and that's about it. Next we have the VB Spitfire, which is my least favorite fighter plane. However, it is very good at one thing, and that is to kill tanks, which is pretty much all it's good for anyway. Personally, it's just, yeah, it's my least favorite as it largely depends on how many tanks are present on the map. I'll only really pick this up on Hamada because there's a lot of tanks there. Looking at the upgrades, we'll just start with the twin 50 cal machine guns. I primarily use them against infantry, but they aren't really that good at infantry either because they're wing mounted, so they have like convergence point, so it's hard to aim them as you get closer. Secondly, we have the auto repair again, which I already explained. In the third slot, we have nitrous, which is a new upgrade on this guide. I haven't explained it yet, and I'm not entirely sure what it does, but to my understanding, it activates itself when you're on low health. That's what it seems to do for me, and it gives you like a higher velocity and a little bit better turn speed. But I'm not 100% sure on this, so correct me down in the comments if you actually know what it does exactly. Finally, we have the only reason this aircraft is actually useful, which is the 4 rocket pods. Each pod has 2 rockets, so you have a total of 8, and they'll do about 80 damage against a tank. They're pretty underwhelming against infantry, but if they group up enough, you can definitely farm with them. And yeah, they're alright weapons to have, but yeah, definitely just anti-tank on those ones. Finally, we have the best anti-aircraft plane in the game, there's just no contesting it, the VA Spitfire. It's mainly effective just due to these cannons it has. It has 8 times 303 cannons on its wings, and they're just ridiculous against aircraft. You can come up from pretty much any angle and get a one-pass kill with the VA Spitfire. It's definitely the thing that kills me the most, and it's just like really, really deadly if it sneaks you. If you get a VA Spitfire behind you, you can't deal on them, you can't really defense them. If they're a good pilot, they will kill you every time if they're behind you. So you need to be, like when you're playing against the VA Spitfire, you need to be very careful and just be constantly checking that scoreboard to look for the pilot icon on the enemy team. They're also very, very effective against infantry. Make sure to equip these as the first upgrade and just go for infantry from longer ranges, I find is better because again, they are wing mounted, so there is a convergence point and they have a lot of spread. So at long range, you can tend to make the most of that spread and convergence and get a really fast kill. As you get closer, you're going to have to compensate for the convergence point. But by convergence, I'm meaning that the cannons exactly line up at a certain distance. However, everything else from that, they're like either side of the target. So you'll have to compensate for that as you get closer. The second upgrade is the auto repair, I believe. Yeah, it is the auto repair. And the third slot, we have the 2 250-pound bombs. These are pretty strong for finishing off a strafe, but make sure to get some distance from the ground when dropping them, as it's very easy to kill yourself and the enemy with these bombs. I feel like they did get buffed secretly in an update recently because I thought they were very underwhelming at first, but now I'm really enjoying them. So yeah, definitely use these things against infantry, and don't be afraid to pull off a little bit earlier just to drop your bombs, because it's either pull off early, drop the bombs, or strafe without the bombs. You can't just strafe low and drop the bombs because it will kill you. So be very careful with that. Additionally, they're the only way to damage tanks in the VA Spitfire, doing about 50 damage if both are hit absolutely perfectly to a light tank, and they go down to about 36 damage, I think, if you hit them on a heavy tank directly. So they're pretty underwhelming again against tanks, like 36-41, I think, but yeah, they're the only way you can really damage them, and if you see a tank, you may as well just drop them if you're going back to resup anyway. So yeah, they're alright, and you can definitely solo a tank with these. Finally, we have the air radar again, which I explained in the G2, but again, it's not really an awareness thing, it's a dogfighting thing, because it's only 250 meters, so you're only going to be able to see people within your dogfight. You're not going to be able to see people from the other side of the map like you could in BF4. Just as importantly as a good loader, a good control scheme makes or breaks a pilot. I recommend using mouse and keyboard if you want to be as good as possible, and here are the controls I use when flying the planes in BF5, so I'll go to a quick clip where I explain it. Alright, so I'm going to go over my settings real quick. Before I actually launch into the game, I'm just going to show you my config file. I'll put the like lines in the description to enter into your notepad document, but let's just get right into it. So you want to go and find your Battlefield directory. So I have it here, and this is basically where you install the game. And you want to make a notepad document and just call it user.cfg, and I'll just quickly grab all the code off here. But you want to grab that stuff and just paste it straight in here. And okay, so I'll just explain this real quick. A lot of this stuff is to disable anti-aliasing, and this is just to force my pre-rendered frames to 3. You can just change, this is the setting that you probably want to change. Depending on your CPU and GPU usage, you might want to change it to 2. But yeah, this is what I have mine on, and to enable this in game, you have to set your motion blur to 1%. But basically what you want to do to actually set it up is, yeah, you paste it in the file, and then you'll go save as, and then you want to make it all types, and then it's just .cfg file, and it will give me the option to replace it because I already have one, but you just want to click, you wouldn't have to do this if you were doing it for the first time. And yeah, that's how you basically set up the user CFG, and we'll launch BF5. Alright, so here in the menu of BF5, I'm just going to go over all my settings because a lot of them are still relevant to planes. So we'll go straight into controls. My vehicle sensors here, and in advanced there's a plane sensitivity, and I lowered this to 100% instead of what it was originally, which is 150. Besides that, none of this really matters that much for vehicles, but these are my settings at 400 DPI. So going to gameplay, we have a lot of this stuff I think is default. Yeah, this is, besides kill log, you want to turn it on, and then you can make it icon plus name if you want. I just like, you at least need name. Name is very nice to have because that way you can find the difference between a VA and a VB Spitfire. And I just turned off share usage data in case it's using my internet. All these hit markers are default. My minimap is a little bit bigger, and I have the flight zoom radius a bit up to 350 because I can use my big map for anything bigger than that. And that's about it. Everything else is pretty much default here. I don't know why this is 17%, but I'll just leave it if it works. In advance, this is a pretty big one. My plane chase camera roll is off. There was a guy asking me in my comments about this, but I figured I would just answer it in the video. So if you have it off, the plane doesn't roll, or the camera doesn't roll with the plane, but if you have it on, it does. This is a preference setting, and yeah, you just have to try both and see what you like, but I think it's better to have it off, so that's how I have it. Here in audio, we have 3 headphone settings, and my sound is pretty loud. If I was a really, really serious dogfighter, I'd have my sound like maxed out, but I don't think it is really that necessary, so I keep it about 50%. Because if you have the sound louder, you can maybe hear a plane a little bit easier, because you often switch depending on where you hear the other plane, right? So that is something that you might want to consider. I haven't went through all these audio options very deeply yet. I've just been using 3 headphones. Video settings is kind of important. Remember 1% motion blur to fix the anti-aliasing or turn it on. As you can see, if I turn it off, I think everything should have anti-aliasing again. Yeah, it does. But if I turn it back on, it looks a bit like more jagged and sharp, which is kind of how I like it. So yeah, in video we have max FOV. This is pretty important. Infi FOV, it doesn't really matter. 50% brightness, it's a pretty big one. You're just gonna have to play around and see what makes it easier for you, but I think it's way easier to spot with a little bit less brightness. This is pretty much default though. You want to run the highest refresh rate you can, unless you want to lower it depending on what FPS you're getting. I get 200 FPS in the planes a little bit, so I like to have it maxed out, I guess. All this stuff should be off. The custom color settings can be on if you want it, but everything else here should be all off. This is a preference setting for infantry, so I'm not going to go over that. Here's some more juicy stuff, I guess. If you have an i7 8700K, you can use DX12 and the config file that I think I linked, and you get a really good FPS from what I know. But I don't. I have a 7700, so it doesn't work for me for some reason. So I have that off. GPU memory restriction, that has to be off as well for more FPS. VSync off for less input lag. This adds a little bit of input lag, but it gives you way more FPS, so I have it on. And these are all my settings, all low. So I found out that mesh doesn't actually, it renders in like buildings and stuff from further away, but it doesn't. Infantry always renders in basically, so you can like see through walls and stuff at long range with mesh on low. So it is kind of nice to have that, and especially with the cannons on some planes, you can literally spray through walls anyway. So it's a definite upside to have that on low, as well as the extra FPS. And here's some of the more juicy stuff that you guys are probably coming to this video for. These are my controls for the planes, and you'll be surprised that it's pretty simple, right? So pitch up is the space bar. I just have this so I can dogfight, hold down space to turn around, pretty simple. Everything else is default except exit vehicle. I put it on T instead of E. It's just easier to like not bail out the plane. Now we have switch seat. I should probably bind something better, but I have full map bound to mouse 3. It's a side mouse button, and I like just having my full map really easy to access because I check it a lot. zoom minimap, well, not as much as BF4, but the zoom is default at N. Chase camera is mouse 4, which is again a side mouse button, which helps a bit. And I think that is it. So yeah, hopefully that helps you guys out, and we'll get back to the video. Now we're moving on to ground attack, which is what you'll be doing unless an enemy plane is up. This pretty much just involves strafing targets on the ground, such as infantry and tanks. And I'll just start this by saying that your first priority is always killing the AA, unless you have back flags which need farming, or need like focus. If there's back flags and an AA at the back of the map, you might be better off just to focus the back flags, get rid of those infantry, and the AA might even get bored and just jump off and run into the fight anyway. Your priority is killing the AA, however, like if you don't have the back flags and you should be using rocket pods to do that, the easiest way to do it again is just go from a very long distance and just hit them with 2 rocket pods, not even compensating them. And here's a clip in the background of me doing this exactly. In the VA Spitfire, it becomes a lot harder, but you basically have 2 options. You have to go in with the cannons and sneak it, or go in with bombs and sneak it. A head-on with the AA is pretty much a loss every time with the VA Spitfire, unless you get the upper hands and start spraying it way earlier. It's much better that your bombers or VBs kill it. So again, VA Spitfire versus AA isn't a good fight, and it's basically the direct counter to the VA Spitfire. Once the AA is down, you can start picking off ground targets. For all the maps, you'll just have to learn where infantry tend to run from flag to flag with experience. I don't really want to explain all of this. I don't even know it myself. I'll get much better at it, and maybe I can explain it later. However, the best way to learn this is pretty much just to run an Infi game on all the maps just to figure out the general rotations. If you do this, you'll have a general idea where Infi tend to run. And also, on maps like Araz or Fagel, you'll find areas which is much easier to spot infantry, so you might want to focus on those areas a little bit more. However, for spotting infantry, you want to maximize your frame rate and vision. So I'd recommend just using all low settings, or the settings I'm about to show you right here. So I'll just cut to a clip explaining the settings. When engaging infantry targets, make sure you're using the right weapons for the job, as explained in the loadout. Certain weapons are much more effective than others against the infantry. And as for aiming, it's just something that comes with practice. There's a few things you have to consider when aiming. There's obviously the lead on the target, like there's vertical dropping as well with the cannons, and there's also just convergence. Once you get the hang of all those and you kind of figure out your angles, it's going to be easier for you to aim. I'd recommend aiming from a lower angle, kind of, because you see more of their body. If you aim from a vertical angle, unless you have the splash damage cannons, it's going to be a little bit harder to aim. So again, the kind of lower angle you have, the easier it is to aim, but the kind of more risky it is to getting panzerfausted and stuff. So you want to find that nice middle ground with probably like a 30-degree angle for strafing targets. When pulling away from a strafe, you should always check your rear view camera, which defaults to the middle mouse click, just to check for targets for your next strafe. Flying planes is literally just a game of attacking and retreating, and during your retreat, you should always be playing your next attack. So when I say retreat, I mean like flying away from the targets, and when I say attack, I mean obviously attacking the targets, right? So finally, when engaging tanks and AAs with rockets, remember that you don't have to vertically compensate, as they just aren't affected by gravity for some reason. You'll need to compensate for the tank if it's moving, however, which is something you'll just get used to. As for bombing tanks in the VA Spitfire, do it in third person and just get used to how the bombs drop. It's something that just took me a few games to get the hang of, but again, once you get used to it, it's not that bad. Finally, I was going to talk about dogfighting in this video, but come to think about it, it's going to take way too long to describe it, much longer than I'd be willing to do in one video. So let me know if you want me to make separate videos on dogfighting, because I'm going to have to make a lot of them. However, what I'd actually recommend, and I'd say is probably better than me explaining it, is heading over to Smashuu's channel. I'll link it in the description, but he has a lot of dogfighting tutorials for Battlefield 3 that still definitely apply to Battlefield 5. The main differences, and I'll go over them quickly. Firstly, you cannot really win a defensive fight against like a VA Spitfire. It just doesn't really happen. Like the VA Spitfire has cannons that are that good that you're just going to die every time. So how you really counter this is you just want to be constantly holding down your scoreboard button, and you can see the little icons next to names, and if you see a plane icon, that means there's a pilot up, and you just want to go kill them and make sure there's never a plane icon on the enemy team. So as long as you can keep all the planes down, you shouldn't have much problem like with sneakers, and you can keep that like awareness, because there's no radar in this game, so you really need to just be relying on that scoreboard. Other than that, there aren't many things that are super different from BF3. It's just there's a lot less reliance on speed control and a lot more on maneuvering in this game. So again, like when you're switching, you really want to make sure that you're not in vision of them. Like there's a lot of things that you just still carry on from BF3 and BF4, but again, there's no speed control, so it's takes a little bit longer to get those angles and a little bit longer to defend and like switch properly. Anyways, I hope this video helps you guys out. It's probably longer than I'd like it to be, but I think it covers a lot of the stuff that you should be knowing as a pilot in Battlefield 5. So definitely stay tuned, subscribe if you want more videos like this, and I'll be sure to break down more stuff as I keep playing this game.